The Columbus Blue Jackets on paper could be one of the most improved teams in the NHL. Jay Forster of Locked On Blue Jackets joins us to discuss a busy offseason and the prospects for improvement. All that and more on today's Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome, everybody, to the Monday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On NHL your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you can get new episodes as soon as they drop. And you can also now find us on SiriusXM on the SXM app. Just do a search for Locked On NHL. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the show a familiar face and voice for Locked On NHL listeners and viewers, Jay Forster of Locked On Blue Jackets. And Jay, I think when I look at the offseason, Columbus really was one of the more active teams and on paper, maybe one of the most improved. What to you was the biggest single move of this offseason?
I mean, it's got to be drafting Adam Fantilli. You know, I had kind of made, sounds really dramatic, I had made my peace with kind of, okay, we're drafting third overall. Leo Carlsson is going to be a really, really good young player for us, hopefully for a long time. And I think that the Ducks, they knew what they were getting in Carlsson. They liked Carlsson more than Fantilli. That's fine. I still can't believe that Fantilli fell to third overall. In any other draft year, he would go, you know, probably first overall, except for Matthews and McDavid. You know, he's going to be really, really good. And so I think that, to me, that was the biggest move. I liked the bringing in of guys like Damen, Severson, and Ivan Provorov. They're going to have less kind of flashy impact, but they are sturdy, they are durable, they solidify the defense in a way that the Blue Jackets didn't really have last season because of injuries. And I think a lot of people are just kind of looking at those two guys as that's the only two guys the Blue Jackets added. But I think a lot of people forget that they lost Zach Werenski 13 games into the season. He was done by the start of November. So essentially, they're getting a Zach Werenski back as well. And I think that's a really big piece of the offseason, is someone that they didn't get necessarily, but someone that they have reacquired, I guess is the word for it.
And, you know, you talked about Fantilli and that he would have been a number one pick in most other draft years. What do you think he adds to the team this year? And what do you expect from him in his first season in the NHL?
I mean, he gives this team a legitimate presence at center. I don't think he's going to be the true all situations number one center in his rookie season, because he's going to be 18 years old. And I'm trying really hard to temper my expectations, because it's so easy to kind of get caught up in the hype and like, he's going to win the Calder and he's going to score 100 points and the Blue Jackets are going to win the Stanley Cup and he's going to get the Conn Smythe. You know, it's really easy to kind of get caught up in all of that. So I'm trying to temper my expectations, but to my mind, Adam Fantilli is going to come in here as the best player that the Blue Jackets have at center. He's going to play in the top six. He's going to play with some combination of Johnny Gaudreau, Kirill Marchenko, Kent Johnson, and Patrick Laine. And I kind of talked about it a little bit on Locked On Blue Jackets last week. We kind of did a couple of hot takes, so to speak. And I said that I think Adam Fantilli can do 30 goals, 30 assists for 60 points this season.
That would be a big boost, obviously, to the Blue Jackets. Also, a new coach coming in now, a new old coach or familiar coach around the league, Mike Babcock. What does he bring to the table?
He brings experience and he brings structure. And I think the second one of those is the more important thing. I think experience is good, but I also think that something that the Blue Jackets were severely lacking last season was structure. There was reports coming out that they didn't know what they were doing in practice until like they got on the ice and were told. I don't know how abnormal that is for NHL games, but I would expect NHL teams to be told what they're going to be doing in practice in advance, send out an email or whatever. They didn't practice a lot of what they were supposed to. And I think Brad Larson really struggled to just give the team some structure. And so I think if they get anything from Mike Babcock, it's going to be structure, which for a very young team, I think is important.
One thing that certainly should be improved this year is depth, especially at the blue line. I know they were decimated by injuries last year. How much more excited are you about the prospects of this defense core this season as compared to what happened a year ago?
Oh, so excited. I don't think a lot of people realize just how bad the defensive situation was for the Blue Jackets. In the final game of the season, they were playing 4 rookies. They had 4 guys playing in their second ever NHL game. For large parts of the season, Andrew Peeke and Erica Branson were the number 1 defensive pairing on this team, and they're both very acceptable NHL players. Neither of them are top pairing guys, and that's no disrespect to either of those guys. So you bring in Provorov, you bring in Severson, it solidifies that second pairing. It gives you more freedom to put guys like Peeke and Branson on the third pairing, where I think they'll do a lot better this season, playing limited minutes against weaker competition. David Jiricek, who tore the AHL apart last season, is extremely NHL ready. I'm expecting him to make a big push to make the team out of training camp. And that's not even, Adam Boquist doesn't fit into this lineup. Jake Bean doesn't fit into this lineup. The Blue Jackets have maybe 8 or 9 NHL defensemen for 6 spots. So the depth now is just so much better than when it was Eric Gabranson and literally a bunch of teenagers.
Other than Fantilli, any other prospects that fans should take note of on this team who have a decent shot to play some significant minutes this year?
I think, obviously, David Jiricek is at the top of that list. I fully expect him to make a huge push to make the team. In my mind, he should be playing on that top pairing with Zach Werenski. I think he's ready. I think that's going to be a very good pairing. Another name who is not quite a prospect, but will be playing in his rookie season is Dmitry Voronkov, who's coming over from Russia, much like Kromachenko did last season. I believe he was drafted by the Blue Jackets in 2018. So he's coming over. He's 22. He's going to be a big, probably second or third line center. He's got some snarl to him. He's a big body. He can kill penalties. And he gives the Blue Jackets a little bit more depth at center as well, and that hopefully will free up guys like Kent Johnson, who I think works better as a winger, and Boone Jenner, who I also think he had a really good season this season, but I also think he's one of those guys whose game works better on the wing. So you bring in a guy like Voronkov, he's a little bit more matured than a guy like Fantilli, who once again is going to be 18 years old when the season starts, and I think that's someone that Blue Jackets fans should really keep their eye on, because I think he's going to surprise a lot of people.
Should be a very interesting season for the Blue Jackets. Certainly a lot more optimism than there was at the end of last season. I think that's an understatement. Jay, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
Yes, you can find me at _Jacob Forster on Twitter. That's JAKOB FORSTER. You can find the podcast Locked On Blue Jackets over at LO_Blue Jackets. I do that with my co-host Hayden Heilshorn. You can find him on Twitter at HaydenH971. And you can find the podcast wherever you get Locked On NHL. We're on every podcast app of choice. We're over on YouTube and SiriusXM.
All right, Jay, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Football season has gotten underway, and FanDuel is giving you a chance to win all season long. Because right now, when you bet on a Super Bowl winner, you can get bonus bets every time they win in the regular season. Just pick any team to win the Super Bowl, and you'll get bonus bets for every victory all season long. You could use those bonus bets on spreads, player props, over-unders, and a lot more. And it doesn't matter what team you bet on. Anytime they win, you get bonus bets. So visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn and start earning bonus bets with America's #1 sportsbook. That's FanDuel.com/LockedOn. FanDuel.com/LockedOn. Check it out today.